full-bodied Chevy pickup truck. Not supercharged, not fuel-injected, but carbureted, put down this incredible run, driving around Mike Camella in the Bonkers machine at the finish line. But look at the elapsed time as you watch how this incredible 2,700-pound machine launched. 2.12 seconds. Far and away the quickest elapsed time for a full-bodied truck in U.S. Hobbit Association mud racing history. The only man that was even coming close to those kind of marks is Jeff Sturkin with his ground zero entry, but the numbers weren't done yet. Greg Alders in the Bog Bandit number 2. Machine utilizing Chrysler wedge power took on another old standard, Tom Meentz, who had already at this point become a veteran of the U.S. Hobbit Association Trail to shake the entry. Meentz put down one of the quickest rides of his life in outrunning Albers, putting down a rather unusual starting line technique here as you see the machine sideways, then out of the pit, then back in, and then up to a 2:06, the quickest Meentz had ever run, and at that point, a new track record for Pontiac. Mike Spina in the far lane with his supercharged 1927 Ford Roadster called Psychotic Beast. Took on the working chassis in mud racing, that under the Mudbuster of Mark Green. Looking green as Spina takes a nosedive at the finish line. The nitrous oxide injected carbureted Jeep funny car working perfectly, ran another career best by almost 0.2 of a second, 2.14 seconds. An astounding feat in that entry. If Green and Meentz could put down those kinds of runs, everybody failed to even think. How quick Tom Martin, the world champion, going the Mud Patrol 32-4. Perfect conditions. Martin lifted the front end, stayed with it, and then shut off just before the finish line to put down a run that may have been slower than people thought. That wasn't until the time of 2.00 seconds was announced. And when you take into consideration that he shut off just before the finish line, that was another 1-second run for Tom Martin. Jake Hankey from Pennsylvania, the Ace is High Chevy El Camino monster truck using a supercharged small block Chevrolet. Took on one of the favorites in the northern part of the country, Mark Bendler out of Wisconsin, in the Kodiak, high-riding GMC and monster truck action. There had already been some pretty wild monster truck racing. Jeff Fergie in the Plain for Keith machine losing a front tire, taking quite a wild ride across the floor of the Silverdome. The crowd was ready for anything when these two lined up. After a side-by-side launch and a slight lead by Bendler, both machines way up in the air, one of the roughest landings of Jake Hankey's life in the Aces High, but it wasn't enough to get around Kodiak. Take a look, though, in slow motion at the landing this 14,000-pound El Camino took on the Pontiac Silverdome floor. Bounced it around like monster trucks are not supposed to, no question about it. As far as Kodiak was concerned, Mark Bendler had been away from the winner's circle for quite a few events, but indeed this particular finish line launch shows you that he was back in form. One of the heaviest and highest riding monster trucks of the business came back with a big win in front of the Pontiac Silverdome crowd. Kelly, it was an excellent event with numbers that nobody could believe.
Well, coming up next, to action in the Superdome in New Orleans, and from Oklahoma City's Fairground Arena, where the sport of mud racing was changed forever. In New Orleans showcased the technological progress the sport had made through the mid-season with some amazing new vehicles.
Past the midway point in the season, the New Orleans event brought out quite a few new vehicles, including Billy McWilliams' Crazy Horse. Now, we'd seen that car before, but then it was a full-size 74 Mustang, too. Larry D'Antoni, a policeman by trade, brought out his Addicted to Mud. It should look familiar. It's another 1932 Ford fiberglass coupe body on a two-frame chassis with a big block Chevy engine, just like world champ Tom Martin's. The machine in the far lane, driven by McWilliams, is still what's left of an all-steel 74 Mustang II, but it was D'Antoni who really opened eyes with an incredible run that was the first pass ever on this brand-new 1932 Ford. Even though the pit was a little bit wet, you can see it did everything the way it was supposed to. At 2.46 seconds, the New Orleans area policeman definitely put down a run. At least at that point, it set the pace. And the rest of the field then had to make the chance to get up. Here's the man who has definitely put down some incredible runs, Bud Crum of the Crum Racing family out of Kansas City, Kansas, and this awesome new vehicle. Closer to drag racing machinery than anything else is Don Johnson's Cool Breeze 1988 Chevy Corvette. It was also visiting a mud pit for the first time in its young life. Crum moved up with his altered wheelbase Jeep CJ to take on the Corvette in front of the fans, but the Corvette made it look foolish. Unbelievably quick run for the first pass ever for the Cool Breeze entry of Don Johnson. While the new machines were making the noise, the old standbys were still in attendance. Jesse Jacobs with his Terminator, a 3,000-pound full-size Chevy pickup, took on one of Texas' favorite sons, Bubba Clements. The chances are supercharged Chevy-powered Jeep. Look at this incredible pass. Just about picture perfect. But the elapsed time, 2.54 seconds, was still not enough to beat the 2:46 by Larry D'Antoni's Addicted to Mud Roadster. Indeed, the supercharged Jeep, though, is still one of the toughest machines in that part of the country. Jim Tollefson, the Sandpacker, a 20-year veteran of this sport, right up there with Clay Langley when it comes to mud racing longevity, moves up against Darren Matthews in the Attitude Adjustment Chevy-powered Toyota pickup, a 2,800-pounder against the lightweight aluminum-bodied entry of Tollefson. Darren Matthews came up with the big surprise here, a mid-2-second run that was a career best for that 2,800-pound vehicle and was good enough to take one of the top 4 positions. But then, having already won one national event already this year, Larry Jarrett out of Oklahoma with the Locomotion supercharged Chevy-powered sprint car moved it up in his attempt to take over the #1 spot. Arnie McIntyre and the big man's toy Chevy love truck lined up alongside. It wasn't even close. Trying to beat a 2:46, Larry Jarrett spins it out after running 2.12 seconds. The quickest run ever in New Orleans, and by far good enough to win the event. In monster truck competition, Bigfoot versus the original tank. The Virginia Beach Beast hit a side-by-side crisscrossing track that actually was more scary than exciting at certain points in the course. As the tank moved up for its hit, it was Bigfoot by 2 truck lengths, and the 15,000-pound Ford outran the 22,000-pound tank Chevrolet in quick and fast style. As the tank spun around, the crowd was on their feet for both of the machines, especially after this incredible last hit by Jim Kramer driving, once again, the #1 team machine from the St. Louis-based Bob Chandler garages. An amazing ride, and at this point in the Monster Truck Wars in the U.S. Hobbit Association circuit, it looked like there was no catching the Bigfoot team for the season championship, especially when they can outrun just about anything there is in the Monster Truck Wars anymore, Kelly.
Well, Brett, as the tour headed for Oklahoma City, the U.S. Hot Rod Association had instituted new safety rules that would literally change the sport.
There's no question that at Oklahoma City, something happened that will change mud racing forever, and that was the institution of brand new finish line shutdown area marker cones that would mean a disqualification for drivers who went too far past the finish line. The first man up was a driver who was moving in on Tom Martin's World Championship points lead. The supercharged Chevy S10 of Michigan's Jeff Sturkin called ground zero. He locks up the brakes to avoid being disqualified. The first orange pylons you see are warning cones. The second set meant you're out at 2.52 seconds. He sets the pace, but the finish line shutdown disqualification area did create problems for a few drivers, including what is basically a drag racing fuel altered with four-wheel drive. Ron Smith and the Gold Fever supercharged Chevrolet-powered Fiat Topolino coupe that has been one of the scariest cars of the 1989 season. Smith left beautifully, but thundered past all the cones and was automatically thrown out as that disqualification area came into play with some of the faster cars. Back when it used to be a sport where you just went through the pit as quick as possible, it's now changed to a situation where you try to get through the pit as quickly as you can, and then you have to stop the vehicle just as quickly. Smith went through both the warning cones and the actual disqualification area, throwing out a run that would have been good enough for one of the top 3 spots. Tom Meentz in the supercharged Shakely machine, still at it in his rivalry with Tom Martin, knew he had a good one, stopping within 5 feet of the disqualification area at 2.44 seconds to take over the #1 spot. But that left the reigning world champion with Sturkin and Meentz on his tail in the points chase to try and get back to #1 spot and pick up what would be at this point his 7th national event victory of the season. The 541 cubic inch Chevrolet thumping away. NOS nitrous oxide under the front cowling. Martin leaves the line and shuts the engine off before the finish line because he was so worried about the disqualification march, and he knew that for the first time in 1989, Tom Martin had just plain messed up. The run had all the makings of one good enough to win the event. Martin had shut the engine down more than 15 feet before the finish line on the 80-foot-long course. The starting line launch was perfect. The car immediately up on top of the mud. And then you see him hit a couple of ruts, and then with the finish line looming ahead, he shuts the engine down and coasts across at 2.53 seconds. Even with the engine idling at the finish line, he was only a 1/10 of a second away from taking the lead at that point. But indeed, Tom Martin hurt his World Championship bid at that point, and he knew it.